Go on. Go lay down. Go on. Go lay down. Go lay down. Turn that. Somebody give me a thumbs up or something if you guys can hear me. Just want to make sure. Hi, guys. Just watching this load a little bit here so I can see. You hear me, right? Thank you, Melody. So, Flora's trying to get into the chat. Flora Nichols.
Does she need a link?
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. All right, guys. Yep. Flora Nicholas, my friend there, joining some of my friends. I think they're coming for moral support. Okay, let's start off with some good news before we talk about post-traumatic stress and all the happiness that comes with that. So I was talking to some CBS folks today where I used to work, and actually there's still some good ones there. Unfortunately, they just happen to work for a shit organization. But yeah, it's breaking now that Greg Bovino is on his way out. So he won't be in your town as of like right now. I think he's leaving, and I've heard they're going to pull 800 agents out of Minneapolis, like starting immediately. Okay, let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll get into the meat of the story today. They're going to pull him out because he's an evil bastard and a Nazi, and they're going to bring in Tom Homan, who's probably going to come in and talk a lot softer, but he's still a fucking Nazi. And so we have to understand that, you know, until they fire all these people, you're still going to be under the same conditions. I mean, they might pull out everybody out of Minneapolis because it's really politically, it's a bombshell at this point for the administration, but it does not mean that it's going to get a lot better throughout the country. And it may calm down, but you know, we saw Pam Bondi's letter yesterday demanding all this stuff, including the voter rolls from Minnesota. These people, we need to get rid of them. We need to get rid of people like Pam Bondi, who's a fake attorney general, and we need to get rid of people like Bovino, who's probably going to go on to another assignment. They'll probably keep him on just because, you know, they don't want him talking about stuff that he knows. Homan will come in and, you know, maybe he won't have the story about his $50,000 bribe for a few days while he's terrorizing everybody else. And we'll see what they do to try to calm Minneapolis, but they'll still probably, I'm thinking they'll still keep people there and do raids. But obviously it's a victory for Minneapolis. They've done a lot of work and they put a lot of pressure on the administration. And obviously people went to them and said it's not working. And Trump is going to talk softer. Don't buy any of this stuff. Don't buy any of it. He is absolutely got surrounded by people like Stephen Miller still, who started these whole things in the first place, this $3,000 person immigration capture mandate that he has, which is impossible. And just deporting people at will and arresting citizens, and this tough guy thing about taking everything by force, including other countries like Greenland. These people are not good people. And you could take you could take the Greg Bovinos away one by one, but you have to get rid of the lot. You have to get rid of Kristi Noem, the dog shooter. You know, you have to get rid of Bondi because she's not actually following the law. She's a sycophant for the administration. You know, and there needs to be some sort of reconciliation by eliminating the people that are there who are just flat out evil. We all know this. That's all we really need to talk about. But I know that some of the other thing is I talked to a guy who was producing there for CBS. And remember, a lot of these people that work for CBS have been working there a long time. This particular guy was working there. I won't even say. Anyways, I don't want to put him in a bad position. But you know, some of the things they're dealing with. You know, when they are going to do interviews, for instance, at press conferences with Bovino, they have to go into the certain building that they're going into, and they come out and they're getting harassed by protesters. You know, these guys are trying to do their job and keep the light shed on what you guys are doing in Minneapolis. And it may not seem like they're helping at all, but you know, the mainstream media has got a bad name right now, and CBS especially. But remember, some of these people have been around a long time. They don't necessarily love what's going on within their own network. They're just doing their job to tell the stories the best way they can. So please, you know, you're scaring seasoned people with the way you're treating them when they're coming in and out of those lines in front of the Whipple building, right? So just be careful. The other thing is, they had a person who was coming and came in, and he was telling me a story about how they brought in a person to replace somebody, and he was driving in a rental car. And apparently, Minneapolis, you guys have been taking the license plates of all the ICE people, but some of the ICE people only stay for a week or two at a time. And they returned that rental car and they handed it over to a CBS employee who came in. And because they checked out a license plate, they thought he worked for ICE. This person worked for ICE, which was not the case. And no, they couldn't convince anybody that he didn't work for ICE. So just, know that your intelligence is really only as good as maybe 24 to 48 hours. That's the way intelligence works. And what you may think one day may not be true the next for whatever reason. So be careful how you use that information. You might be, going after the wrong people. And if you scare away the national media, you'll have no eyes on what you're doing. And that's not going to be good, right? So just take that into consideration. The other thing I would say before we start talking about post-traumatic stress is, when somebody gets shot and, killed, do us all a favor and post their picture on your profile and make sure the world doesn't forget about them, because there's going to be more. There's going to be, there's going to be more goods. There's going to be more, Preddies. There're going to be more people like that who deserve to be remembered properly when the administration's saying shitty things about them and calling domestic terrorists of them. And let the world know that you don't feel that way. Post a picture. That comes from somebody in Minnesota who asked me to do that yesterday, and I told him I'd tell my misfits to spread the word and get your friends to share it as well. Okay, now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my background. I'm not, I'm not trained in therapy, or I'm not a psychologist, but I've been in a lot of war zones, and I'll tell you some stories, and then after I tell you some stories about what I've experienced, I'll tell you how it affected me. And I think a lot of people there will be understanding of it because you're probably experiencing some of it yourself. I mean, I think there's two trains of thought. There's the people who are on the ground who are going to experience it in a direct way, and there are people that are not on the ground who are going to experience it in a very indirect way. I'll give you an example. After 9/11, my first wife, I've been married twice. Holly's my second wife. Her name was Kyle Foster. She was a reporter too, and she worked for Bloomberg News. Mostly what she did is covered finance all the time. And then 9/11 happened, and she got put on the duty of recording all the deaths that were found, at 9/11 at the Twin Towers. And it was one of those things where she would have to go from the missing category to the next day maybe they found him. Maybe 2 weeks later they found another person. And it went from potentially maybe alive because they hadn't found them yet or located them slowly to this list that showed the dead. And it was like 3,000 people. And she wasn't in New York. She was in Princeton, New Jersey, where they were working, right? And she was on this list, and it was constantly updating as they were pulling more people from the rubble, more bodies from the rubble. And imagine a finance reporter, just sitting in front of a computer in Bloomberg's Princeton offices, and all she did all day was track these bodies. Now, she wasn't even there. She had very serious emotional issues that came with that. And so you could be a long way away and experience post-traumatic stress, or you can experience traumatic stress, we'll say, from those things. And you don't have to be there. So as it relates to a lot of people here on this, let's just talk about that a little bit. The first instance is, like, for me, it was a war journalist. I was always seeing everything front and center all the time. But some of you may be on the ground experiencing that stuff firsthand, and you'll have very clear, very understanding of how that affects you. And then the other folks are those people watching news programs every day. And you may experience similar things just from continuously watching that video. There's a reason that over the course of history, newspapers and television stations were very careful about showing you those very last moments of somebody dying. In this case, they're showing more of it, and they're not showing it for sensational reasons. They're showing it to you because the administration is lying about what you're seeing. And so they have an obligation for you to see those things yourself up front and in reality. And they're taking the role very seriously. And it takes a toll on you, especially when you see it over and over again. So my first recommendation is, when you're watching a lot of news, watch something a couple times if you really feel you need to, and then don't watch that video again. You've already seen it. Instead, the simple thing you could do is after you've watched it, put it away and then go to some secondary source like a newspaper for an account of things and read about those things, because somehow your brain processes things a little bit better when you're reading it and you're not looking at the images over and over and over again. A great example of that would be like New York Times yesterday. New York Times had pictures sent to them from all sorts of people. And in the process of doing that, they put together a story with graphics and maps of what was happening at that event when he was shot. And I saw it a couple times, didn't need to see it anymore. So I went to looking for my sort of traditional sources, and New York Times had a great story out about it. So I think that mix it up a little bit. Don't always look at the TV constantly. I mean, I spent my entire career, well, a good portion of my career, as a newspaper reporter, but then the rest of it as a television producer. I could tell you that one time I was in Iraq, and the story we were working on was about executions and how they were killing people that they captured in Iraq. And I had to watch, over the course of a couple of days, videos that were provided to me by security services in Iraq to tell the story. We're working on it. We're deciding what people could see and what people didn't have to see and how we were going to tell the story. And I watched about 48 executions that were taped from insurgent groups. And I've been covering war for a long time at that point. But to watch people literally executed, in some cases having their heads chopped off with what seemed to be dull knives, and then flying from Iraq to Jordan, and then continuing with my work that night in a hotel in Jordan and watching stuff over and over, taking notes on it. It's a profound impact on you. It's very tough to shake those kinds of things. And I wasn't there for any of that stuff. I was just watching it. So please, be very careful about how you consume your information, because it will have a long-term effect on you. And I'll talk a little bit about when I first started covering war. Some of you guys heard a little bit about this, I think maybe in my introduction, my first podcast, but I'm going to go through it for those people who weren't there and tell you some additional stories that I had to deal with. First time I ever covered war was in Bosnia in 1993, 94 timeframe. And when I was there, I didn't know anything about it. So this is very similar to people in Minneapolis. They've never been in conflict zones. And really, essentially, what you're in is a conflict zone when people are coming and taking people off the streets and snatching them and shooting, even if it's non-lethal rounds at you. It's very daunting. People are coming up and spraying you with stuff. There's two places that I always tell people are really dangerous to work in. One is in a conflict zone. The second is in places where there's protests, because large crowds create all sorts of problems that you don't really know how to deal with. Well, I know how to deal with them now, but like when you first start doing it, you don't. As a protester, you think everything's hunky-dory because everybody around you is like-minded, but it's not always so. I mean, in Egypt, I was in Egypt with a correspondent when she was sexually assaulted in Tahrir Square. 300 people surrounded her from secret police and sexually assaulted her. She's never the same since then, never the same, and really changed the course of her life and her career in a way that's profound, and affected her politics and the way she thought in a way that most people will probably never understand. But she was sexually assaulted in Tahrir Square. I was off somebody at another square. We had arrived in Cairo that night around 11 o'clock, and Mubarak had just stepped down. And when he stepped down, just going through the airport, you were dealing with Mubarak's regime. We're still in power. He stepped away, but they're all still employed. And we had to sneak cameras in. I had literally sewn cameras into the bottom of my backpacks. And the big cameras we brought in with the crew were all confiscated at the airport. We had journalist visas. They confiscated all of our gear. And because I was a producer and didn't have big boxes with me, they pushed me through. And I had these tiny little cameras that we had brought in. And that's what we used to shoot that whole story. But within the first hour of her hitting Tahrir Square, she did a stand-up with a security team around her and another producer that worked with me. And she was sexually assaulted. And the police would not come in and help them. Does it sound familiar? It felt like the police weren't going to help. And they sexually assaulted her. And they were in a group of 100,000 people. But these security people were like a couple hundred surrounded her. And she was actually, after like 30 or 40 minutes of this shit, she was saved by a woman in her headdress and her robe and everything. And they went in and yanked her out when none of the men would do it. took her back to the hotel, and I knew her like a sister, and literally they had to I had to take pictures of her for evidence for the FBI in that night. We got her on a plane the very next day and shipped her back to the United States, where she started treatment for every known, terrible thing that happened to her. She was never ever the same. And uh yeah, and it altered the course of her career in dramatic ways. So I think that, and we stayed and did the story. I had a call from my boss at the time saying we're going to pull the whole crew out because it's too dangerous there. And you're talking about a crew that worked nothing exclusively in war zones. And I told my boss, look, we're going to stay. We're going to find a CBS correspondent on the ground and have them do the work that we arranged for us, and they'll step in and do the interview. And we did that. And the whole reason for that was so that the Egyptian government couldn't send us packing. We wanted them to know that if 60 minutes is going to happen, something's going to happen in 60 minutes, we're not just going to turn tail and run, because that would create a bad precedent for all other media organizations in the country, that they can't just silence people by doing terrible things to them. There's a long story behind that, but like, these are the kind of things that happen in big crowds. ICE personnel, you don't think that they would put some people in plain clothes in the cities that they're coming to if you have big rallies and start trying to do things to create an environment where they can start shooting and killing people? That's exactly what happens. And when you're in a big crowd, you think there's security in that because everybody around you is on your team, but they're not necessarily on your team. And somebody shoots into the crowd and creates panic, you get trampled by hundreds of thousands of people. So when you're in a crowd, when you go in there, have a plan of what you're going to do, where you're going to go, what your limits are, how long you're going to stay. And then also look for places that you can go to if things sound like they're not going right. Is there a big column behind this that I can stand behind if people start running? So you have to look at those things as you're walking, as you're going down the street in a protest. Every 30 seconds, look for the next place you might hide behind should there be a stampede or somebody starts trampling. And that sounds really fucked up, but that's the kind of things you need to be thinking about at all times. Weapons, forget them. They're not helpful with 20 or 30 people. If I rolled up on a bunch of Taliban people and I was having a weapon, there's nothing I could have done with that weapon that would have stopped me from except exposing me as what the administration is trying to say is you're a domestic terrorist. In countries where I worked, I would have been a spy. It doesn't help you at all. So when I was in Bosnia at 24 years old, there was no classes like there are now for journalists, called hostile environment classes. I've been through 20 of them. And the reason they do them is for insurance. They're not really doing them to protect their journalists. I mean, I'm sorry if this pisses off some network people, but at the time I started going my first hostile environment courses, I've been in the business like 15 to 20 years. And so you're really going through those classes so that something happens to you, they can say they trained you properly, and it's harder for your family to sue. But nonetheless, they do have those classes. And for inexperienced people, they're very good, because most of the people, when they go to those places, don't have a lot of experience like I did and some other friends that work for me. So when we went to Bosnia at 24, I went there and I was reporting on that place. And I had 3 or 4 really bad incidents. One, I think I talked about the other night, was when I went into this little town called Gornji Vakuf. And we were allowed to go down the mountainside from the Croatian side into the Bosnia side in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I went around this corner and I saw a sign on the side of the road that said, well, basically it was welcome to Gornji Vakuf. And the town is only a couple hundred yards long, maybe 1,000 yards at the most. And we started taking fire from both mountainsides. The Croats and the Bosnians were shooting at our convoy. And I was in a rental car that was with 2 other journalists. And these buses were getting stopped in front of us because they couldn't figure out which way to go. And that's, just imagine the shit train of these activists that were trying to go to Sarajevo. And I was covering this. And I'm like, well, I'm out. So we tried to go around. Dangerous in itself because there's landmines on the side of the road a lot of times. And we got up to the end of that road and we ran into a UN compound. And I jumped out like a rock star trying to show my UN credentials. And the military there with the blue hats on, the UN troops, told me to get the fuck away because I was just drawing fire to their compound. And I was like, I have a UN credential. And they're like, that doesn't get you into our compound, you idiot. Get the fuck out of here. And I'm like, how do I get out of here? They're like, go back down the road you came down. Like, can you imagine? Like, what? And then make a left. And I'm like, okay, hopefully it's the right left. And we get in, we go, we make that left to go to the top of the mountain. And we get up there and these Bosnian soldiers drag me out of the car, put me on my knees. All this happened in the first hour of me being a war journalist, the first hour. So it's happening to people like that in Minnesota. You know, they're going into a peaceful protest. They're seeing terrible things happen by ICE, and they're monitoring people. They're not. Their brains aren't prepared for it. The training that you're getting is, you know, probably pretty new. And hopefully, some of you are getting some good training on how to deal with this stuff. But things can change in a heartbeat, and you learn very quickly what you can and can't do in these places. So heed those lessons and talk to people who've been doing it for a while. So I go through, and they drag me out of the car. They put an AK to my head, and they tell, we're all talking in different languages to try to get through to these guys. And, you know, one of the guys with me spoke German. They didn't speak French, they didn't speak English. And one guy spoke German. And so he was talking to them. And the German guy that was talking to the guy in German said, well, you know, said something to him. And I said, what did he say? He said, they're going to shoot you because they don't believe we're telling the truth. They're going to start with you. But be calm. Be calm. Don't panic. I was like, oh, sure, don't panic. You know, and this is first hour of my life covering being in the war and actually crossing the front line, being in a war zone. So I get in there and I said, well, don't let them shoot me. Please don't let them shoot me. And he said, I got it, whatever. And it turns out the problem they had was that we had Croatian license plates on a rental car, and we were inside Bosnia at that point. So they thought we were spies because everybody has these knee-jerk reactions, you know? And he just pulled the license plates off the car and stuffed it in the chest of this guy holding a gun in my chest. I mean, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen, but it worked. The guy started laughing, thought it was all a big fucking joke, and then asked for a drink. This Bosnian Muslim guy was asking for booze. So we pulled out some Bekarovka or something like that, and Slivovitz or something. We drank some shots with them, and then he's like, photo. So we all fucking start taking photos with kids. And then they let us go. We let us go through. And, you know, it's those kinds of things that you don't have experience over that last with you forever. You know, are you scared? Or is it things you see? Sometimes when you're having post-traumatic events, it's just your fear, and your fear overcomes you to a way that just feels like you're going to break. And then the other part of that post-traumatic stress is from seeing things happen to people, children, old ladies, old men that had nothing to do with fighting, and that stuff sticks with you, which is what you're seeing in Minneapolis. You know, you're seeing innocent people who are protesting things getting shot and killed for no fucking reason whatsoever, and that's affecting you because you know they're not really dangerous. You know they're not bad people. So you're really being affected by those events. After that, I was staying at this place in Zenica called the Intercontinental Hotel. And I literally, after a couple of events like that, I had a nervous breakdown. Like I can't describe it as anything else. I was uncontrollably crying on the steps of this hotel. I'd been in the war zone for one day. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do this as a career. That first day, I was like, you know, I've got a dozen more checkpoints to get to Sarajevo, and they're all going to be like these assholes. And then they're going to turn into the Serbs. And the Serbs were not kind. They were mean-spirited to anybody because they were under attack by everybody. And, you know, I uncontrollably cried. And I remember telling myself after, like, people were just walking by me, like, patting me on the back, like, you know, it's okay, buddy. You're all right. You're crying. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Just don't worry about it. But I couldn't stop from crying. And I literally just had to say to myself, okay, if I'm going to do this for a living, I have to like get over this fear, because at that point it was just fear. And the only way to do that is just convince myself that this is my chosen path in life, and I just had to fucking deal with it. And it's hard. It's a hard conversation to have with yourself, because you're still fearful, you know, but if you really want to do something, you want to make a difference in something you're doing, you just have to make that decision in your mind. And the second thing, you know, I knew that, you know, the only way to get out of that place was either going back through the place I came from, which seemed insane to me, or going to Sarajevo, where you're going to get shot at going down Sniper Alley trying to get into the city. None of those seemed like very good alternatives. And then, you know, that next day, I was heading into Sarajevo, and I got stopped at a Serb checkpoint. They dragged us out of the car, and they brought us into this little hut place, and they basically were talking in Serbo-Croatian, and they started. They found some pictures that in a camera bag of one of the journalists I was traveling with, who'd been taking pictures of the Croatian military, training, and that was bad. And nobody on my crew knew that this guy was, you know, carrying these pictures. And they found those, and they threatened to kill us all. And they made us basically stand at attention for something like 20 hours. And the last thing this commander said when he left the room in perfect English, after us not thinking he spoke English at all, was, if these guys move or sit down or talk, shoot them. This was day 2 or 3, right? Talk about being out of your league. So know your limitations. Don't be scared to go, this is a bridge too far today. I'm going to learn some more things. I'm going to find some intelligence about what's ahead of me, and I'm going to decide whether this is a good decision for me to make today. In this case, some French UN troops were going through the next day. We've been standing all day and night. And the next day, these French troops came into this room and saw us there. And they said, "Are you okay?" And we're like, "Not really. We're not okay." And these French troops would not fucking leave until these guys released us. This is at a time when they were using human shields to protect all the Serbs. And, this is a lot. This is a lot for a couple days in, And then you get into Sarajevo and they're shooting at you, going down sniper rally, shooting at your vehicle. This idea that the press were always safe, right? The first chance, I remember they were killing a lot of media in Sarajevo, in Bosnia at the time, tons. And I remember years later when I was working for 60 Minutes, I won something from the Overseas Press Club of America. It was the Kaplan Award for international reporting. And, it's one of those things, you fly your mom in from Canada, you know what I mean? You're sitting in there in a table, there's a couple hundred people in the room, and you get this big award for international war reporting. And, you do some reading on Mr. Kaplan. He was apparently in Bosnia when I was, maybe even a little bit before. And he was a TV producer, I think for ABC. And he was driving in a car that had the letters TV on the windshield, so they wouldn't, so he wouldn't get shot by people. They wouldn't confuse him with just a spy or a soldier or whatever. And he was driving down Sniper Alley, and they shot him in the head between the letters T and V. So, association, doesn't save you, So I get into Sarajevo, and I'm at the Holiday Inn in Sarajevo, and there were 2 sides of the hotel. One side that got shelled a lot, and one side that didn't. And you could stay on the side that didn't it would just cost more money. And then if you want to stay on the side that got shelled every morning, that was your choice. But not many people want to stay over there. And I stayed in a room with a bunch of guys, other journalists, and I just paid to sleep on their floor. And I remember the next morning they started shelling the hotel, and I was terrified. This is what, day 4? And they're shelling the hotel, and there's all these really seasoned journalists in there. And I was young, 24-year-old upstart, covering my first conflict. And I jumped right I didn't have a bed. I jumped off the floor, and the shelling started, looking for cover. And I remember this guy sleeping on one of the beds told me to fucking lay down and shut the fuck up. Everybody's trying to sleep. So you're reaching a different stage of journalism at that point, because those guys had become so accustomed to what war was that they'd been desensitized to it. And actually, it's a pretty safe thing, in a way, because you're training your mind at that point to compartmentalize fear and sorrow. You'll run across war journalists or first responders who sometimes seems like they're telling inappropriate jokes for the time, and it's what we call war zone humor, and it's a coping mechanism. You'll find yourself, the longer you experience this stuff, the more you'll start coping by telling stupid, silly jokes about death and destruction. And everybody around you who doesn't understand that will think you're crass, or that but it's a self-preservation technique. You're doing your best to try to cope with the kind of things you're seeing. I'm just going to take a look at my notes real quick. So I leave Sarajevo after a number of weeks, and leave Bosnia after a number of weeks, and I go back to Split, Croatia, which is on sort of the border. It's on the Adriatic coast. And I was a nervous wreck. So this is my first 6 weeks of covering conflict. I get back to the hotel Split, and I get a room, and I basically couldn't come out of that room for like 4 or 5 days. I remember calling my girlfriend at the time, Virginia, and she was living back in the Czech Republic where we lived, and in Prague. And I was just on the phone, just bawling, telling her I didn't know how to leave the hotel room. There was nothing, no part of me that could leave that room, even to go out and eat. I was so stressed out, and there was no danger in Split at the time. It was just on the edge of the zone, and I was, safe, as safe as you can be in a place like that. And I just couldn't leave. So you're already seeing the trauma creep in at that point. And I remember getting back and getting to Prague and knocking on my own door, in Prague, and her opening the door, and I just literally fell into her arms and started crying uncontrollably. And it was kind of like one of those things that for the next several years impacted me in a way that was really hard to describe. I came back to the United States and started working for a newspaper in the United States. And I remember for about 2 years after that, all I ever did was go to sleep at night. And when I went to sleep, I used to have to put a stack of towels next to my bed because I had the same recurring dream for 2 years. And I would wake up in the middle of the night sweating, like cold sweats, freezing. And I'd have to get out of bed and towel off and then put towels over my sheets because my sheets were sopping wet. And that was really the first indication of what I just saw as bad nightmares. And for 2 years, I didn't talk to anybody about it because I thought it was just like something I had to deal with. And we didn't really talk about post-traumatic stress like that then. Again, there was no training for journalists, and there was certainly no psychologist to talk about this stuff to that understood it in a way. And so I was going through this on my own. And the only way I got out of it, which is advice that I'm trying to give you guys who are dealing with stuff. Some of you are going to experience this stuff because they're coming to your town next. And some of you are already experiencing it because you're in Minnesota. The only way to deal with this stuff is by talking about it. If you bottle it up, you're fucked. You'll just continue to have nightmares or whatever else comes with that. And I didn't even know that. I just started talking to one of my best friends about it when I was back in Kentucky. And and then I talked to other people and I started noticing those nightly nightmares started slowly going away. Instead of having them every night, I'd have them every 3 days and then every a week and then every 2 months. And then after a couple of years of this, they weren't there anymore. So I didn't go to a professional therapist. At first, I just went to my friends. And it wasn't the kind of thing that I regularly went to them and called them and said, hey, I need to talk about war. It was just, I'd talk about what I'd see. And they would be like, oh, that's weird, man. Shit. And then just getting out of my system and having them hear was a lot. And the only time I really ever professionally dealt with it was when I was going through a breakup in New York when I was working for 60 Minutes. And I had to go to a therapist to talk about it because I was so depressed. And it all came out in this therapy session. And again, everything else in my life seemed to be revolving around this trauma and this event that I saw. The worst I ever saw in war was not necessarily Bosnia, but it was the first time in Bosnia that I ever understood that I didn't understand what I was seeing. When you become a seasoned war journalist, you know every sight and sound. You know what an AK sounds like versus an M4. You understand the difference between jets flying over you, which, an A-10 Thunderbolt flies slower and lower, an F-16 flies faster and goes through. So you know the weapon systems really well after a while. And you know whether things are outgoing or incoming, And so when you're dealing with that, you don't know what you're hearing or seeing. The trauma is even higher because you don't know. And when you get more experience and you hear things, you know not to stress about it because this is an outgoing round. It's a howitzer. It's not an incoming, it's not an incoming round. And so you learn those behaviors to look for those things. And as a result, you don't get as fearful. I covered conflicts all over the world for 30 years. It's that first event where I didn't understand what was happening around me that stayed with the trauma that triggered me. And I still occasionally have that same recurring nightmare, but not many from all the other places I've covered. And that includes in Somalia, being detained in Libya, being, being shot in Ramadi, being in landmine explosions in Afghanistan. None of those, having members of my team kidnapped for months, none of those events are nearly as bad for me as the first time I covered war in Bosnia when I didn't know what was going on. So knowledge for you folks is your key. You need to be able to understand your battle space. And this is exactly what it is. I'm sorry, but at this point, Minnesota has become a battle space. The only difference is they're not mowing you over and shooting you all the time, but they're shooting enough to give you trauma. And they're tear gassing you and spraying you in the face with mace enough to give you trauma. And you're watching them rip people out of the cars and beat the holy fucking shit out of them. And that's enough to give you trauma. So you have to understand where you are and you have to understand what you're seeing. And you have to understand, your recourse for reacting to things. You have to, the best thing you can do is hand out cards to everybody where the closest hospital is. Have an emergency contact listed on your card. Who's the person I call in an emergency first? What are the police? What's the number for the police department? Which precinct is close by? Can I have a card that has the nearest hospitals for this given day? These can all be organized by people that you're working with, instead of just figuring out like how to get food to people. That's one thing, but also get a group who can help you when you're going to a place in a given day. Get information on a card for you, so it's so you're not having to think it all through in a moment of trauma. You just turn the card over and look at it. And I have hundreds of those cards still from different places where I've worked. So think about organizing that way. Also, if you don't, start planning and getting these, but organize trauma groups for people who need to talk to people. Make it happen in church groups and high school gymnasiums where you can put 20 or 30 people in the room who are suffering from this stuff. And each person, almost like an Alcoholics Anonymous club, should have one or two people they can call if they're feeling really down, and have it at your ready in your phone, because those kinds of things will help you through traumatic times. We all get depressed from seeing and doing these things, but you don't want to stop doing it because it's so important to the cause of what you're trying to follow. Um, little things you can do for yourself when you're feeling stressed out. Get your sleep. If you're used to going to bed at 10 or 11 every night, go to bed at 10 or 11. If you find yourself up till 1 or 2 in the morning, that's a sign that you need to worry because your brain's working overdrive. Put the phone down a couple hours before you go to sleep and go to bed. And even if you lay there for a couple hours, just go to bed. Leave the phone. Hydrate before you go to sleep. Take water and food with you wherever you're going in your little backpack, even if it's 2 or 3 power bars. The general rule is drink every 15 minutes, a couple gulps, eat every 40. Okay. You'll keep your energy levels up even when you're tired. When you're in Minnesota and you're freezing your ass off, that energy will help you. Staying hydrated in a cold, you won't know when you're being dehydrated because it's all inside of your clothes. So drinking regularly all that time will help you keep sharp. And it's important for decision making. When I was in, my friend, some of you know my friend Brent Renault was killed in Ukraine. And we were actually getting ready to go do a film in Ukraine. We were planning on it. We were getting ready to get some money and be hired by a news organization to go do a film. And he was killed 3 days before our meeting. And we made a film about him. His brother directed it and got a bunch of people together to work. And we created this great film that largely a lot of the footage is from his time with his brother overseas and our time with his brother overseas. He was with me in places like Libya, where when ISIS was trying to take control of Libya, the scariest place I ever worked was Libya and Somalia. And those places are fucking off the hook crazy. They make Afghanistan and Iraq look like a total cakewalk. To the point where a 30-year war journalist would not want to go back to those places unless you were paying me a fucking fortune. And Brent, we were in Mosul. We had all sorts of things happen to us there. We had drones dropping grenades on our compound, dropping mortar rounds on our compound from above. You'd walk out of the house, we were in a school. You'd walk out of school in the morning and they'd fly over and fucking drop shit on you. One time literally Brent was covering a person being taken who was injured into the back of an ambulance. And as they walked to the ambulance, they dropped a mortar on him and it blew him into a wall. Like this is the kind of stuff that you're dealing with on a daily basis in a place like that. People trying to overrun your position. We were in West Mosul and ISIS tried to overrun our Iraqi position. There were no Americans with us. And literally somebody walked in the room and handed an AK to our translator, who's a female, and said, if they come through that door, it's not us, shoot them. So these are, you're contemplating that. And they stick you in a room and say, if somebody's coming through this door, it's not us, it's ISIS, shoot them. Right? So these things play through your mind after the fact, much of which, you have to deal with. Just respect the process of making smart decisions. We were in East Mosul, and Brent and I were with our security guy, who was a former SAS soldier, 63-year-old guy who looked like he was 33. It was Dane was this incredible former SAS guy, and I wouldn't have wanted to be with anybody else in that place. And we were coming up on these Iraqi fighters who were fighting ISIS on this front line. And it was hard to get to the Iraqi front line because it was in you had to go down an open road, and they could fire over the Iraqi front line with snipers and shoot you as you were coming down the road. And the other alternative was to go through buildings where they had knocked holes in the walls at the back of the building. And if you walked through, maybe there was a pressure plate on the other side of that wall, and it was the only place to cross. It was a choke point. So they get you to a choke point, you walk through and step on a pressure plate and blow everybody up. So there's not good choices there. Go down and get shot at by a sniper, or go through a hole in a wall and hopefully you don't get killed stepping on the wrong thing or hitting a tripwire. So these are things journalists have to figure out, right? And so we got to a point one time, and Brent and I were trying to get down this road with our guy, our security guy, and it was shooting going all around. We were kind of behind a wall, so we're kind of safe. And we're about 100 yards, maybe 150 yards maximum to this front line where we've been able to spend the whole day there watching this fight from a bunkered position. And every time we went across the road, it was like crack, 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 another 2 or 3 rounds. And when you cross a road, just it's not Minneapolis, but when you cross a road and somebody shoots a sniper round at you, it's really better to go across not one person at a time. It's better to go a couple at a time, because that split second forces a sniper to pick a target. And that's a split second that might get you across the road. So you don't go onesies, twosies, you go 2 at a time. And we were doing that, but we were still getting shot at. And it was pretty fucking scary, because you'd hear that shit winging by your head. You'd hear that little sonic boom, pew, pew, right? And that means it missed you. And we got a couple rounds back and forth going across this road, doing the zigzag down there. And we got about 100 yards away. And I stopped him and I said, listen, this is not going to work today. We're just going to stop. And we're going to go back, and we're going to figure out if we need to come back here tomorrow. And that's what we did. So the lesson here is, if things get too crazy around you, and these ICE guys are acting like fucking idiots that they are, untrained idiots, by the way, and Proud Boys and all the people that join that organization, they love to shoot people. We know that by now. If it gets to where it's too volatile, just leave. You can always go back and protest tomorrow. There's no shame in that at all. No shame in it at all. Don't be scared to say, pride is taking over for me here. I'm going to walk away from this. All right. So those are kind of some important lessons I think you need to understand. Here's the most important thing that I think everybody needs to understand. If you're having post-traumatic stress, and I live with it, if you're having post-traumatic stress, don't be ashamed of it, because it is a normal response to your body's trauma. If you have a normal brain and you're freaking out and you're having post-traumatic stress, that's normal. Okay? You're a normal person. If you're not having a post-traumatic response to that kind of trauma, you're a sociopath. So don't be scared of being scared, and don't be ashamed of being scared. There are generals in the US military who are going through treatment from the things they've experienced. And it doesn't get any more tough than the 4 or 3 4-star general. So just consider yourself a fucking general. I'm a general who's making a smart decision today. I'm going to go talk to somebody. I'm not going to let this overcome me. I'm not going to fall into drinking and drugs to deal with this trauma. I'm just going to talk to my friends. I'm going to fucking talk it out. That's the most important thing, because you're having a normal response. So I think that's something you guys could think about and consider. I think we're going to take some questions here. I'm going to look at what's going on. Yeah, trust me, these are like a 15th of the stories I could tell. They're just the ones that are on top of my head when I'm talking to you. The Egypt thing applies more than anything, I think, to what you guys are seeing, because it was a crowd of 100,000 people, and still things went desperately wrong for the correspondent I was working with on that story. And there was nothing that they beat the shit out of her security that was with her. And I was across town trying to land another interview for 2 days later. We were what they call crashing a piece, which means you're doing it on short notice. And we were trying to do a story about this, Egyptian revolution in 2 days. Normally we work on a story for 3 months. So I was off trying to find another person when I got a phone call to say, come back to the hotel, something bad has happened. And, it's the kind of call where something bad happened so badly that the U.S. ambassador is calling our hotel room, and she's lost her mind, rightfully, because of what had happened to her. So that really does apply. And you do really get in environments where you have to, I'm going to stay here 10 minutes and I'm going to leave. Right. It's just, and sometimes things are out of your control. When you're in a hostile environment like that and you're recording these people, do yourself a favor. First thing you do is find out what space they feel comfortable in. Now they're going to antagonize you because that's what they want to do. This isn't about immigration. We all know that by now. especially after Bondi's memo that they wanted, the voter rolls. This is not about immigration. They're picking up everybody and tormenting them, and they're trying to exert control because they're not a police force. Police people don't act like this. They're his army that he's funded to the tune of about $180 billion. And he's using them for vindication. He's being vindictive to his political enemies and trying to scare the population into thinking when we come to your town, it's going to happen just like this if you don't comply. But we still have a First Amendment right to talk and report. And you have a First Amendment right to record when you're in a public place. When you're in a public place, give them room to operate, blow your whistles, do whatever you feel you need to do. But when they start coming towards you, just say, hey, am I far enough back? And they say, no, move back, motherfucker, move back. Say, okay, no problem. I'm moving back. But keep recording and move back. If they come up and get up in your face, don't fucking start screaming obscenities at them. You don't need to do that. Your camera is your weapon, man. Just say, hey, man, I'm just here recording this. It's my First Amendment right. I know you guys really love to support the Constitution. And I know this protects, but not only me from things that might happen to me today, but it really protects you because as long as you're being lawful, we're both protected by me filming. This is not a bad thing, right? You're an American. You want to make sure that you're not unjustly charged with a crime. So don't do any crimes. And when I'm filming it, you'll be vindicated. Have that discussion with them on camera so that if something does happen bad to you, you have that evidence of it or somebody has that evidence of it. Keep your calm when they can't keep theirs. And remember, these guys are supposed to be trained and you're the ones who are supposed to be freaking out. And you will because you're untrained. And trust me, at 47 days, they're untrained too. If you go through like special operations and learn to become like a special operator, you work for years to learn how to deal with crowds and people. Years, not 47 days. These guys couldn't pass a fitness test if their life depended on it, half of them. All these little MEAL Team 6 guys you see running around, little fatties who are running around trying to tell you they know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And when you surround them and you get up in their face and start putting trauma on them, they're going to react the way they are. One, because they love to kill you. Two, because they're reacting. They're tough guys and you're making them feel less tough. Just record what they're doing. Start getting people to file lawsuits, right? That's the way you beat them. And you beat them at the polls on election day, but you put pressure on them and you got Bovino out of town. Be proud of that, but be careful. Be careful. There's so many things you can do to protect yourself in that environment that still allows you to do what you want to do. Let me tell you one more story real quick. When I was living on a fire base for a couple, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and we were surrounded by Taliban, and we went on missions where literally I'm filming them killing Taliban like right in front of me, shooting out of a cornfield. We go into the cornfield, boom, they waste the Taliban. We filmed all that shit. An American gets shot, boom. We filmed all that stuff for 60 minutes, right? So understand that, those kind of environments for our people, like our cameraman who was filming all that stuff, it's very traumatic. But you need to understand that, when you go into those situations, the things that you see and experience in those places, it won't kick in for months because your brain's trying to deal with it early on. And it'll be months and months sometimes before you really start experiencing the trauma. Months. So prepare yourself for that. Start talking to people now. Recognize the symptoms now, and then, the other story about that same fire base we were on is these guys will go on missions for 10, 12, 13 hours up and down the mountains on foot most of the time, exhausting missions, and then we get back to their tents and you walk in their tents and talk to them. And you know what they were doing? They were playing Mortal Kombat. Okay. Let that sink in. These guys, I just see the comment by Miley Williams right here. Know that these guys, a lot of them joined because they want to serve their country. And listen, I've got a lot of friends in the U.S. military, lots of them, in every branch you can imagine. And some of them are my best friends. And some of them are even public affairs people, who, I had to fight to get information from all the time. I get along with a lot of people. And, I to be honest with you, the majority of people who work for the U.S. military, they're kind-hearted, loving people that really care about their country, patriots, hardworking, well-trained people. But there's also those people who are in there who are playing Mortal Kombat after 13 hours of killing people. This is what they wanted to go and do this work. Okay. And they're nothing like the people you're seeing in ICE. Nothing. The people you're seeing in ICE are the worst of the worst. And I don't care what Bavino said on that fucking interview the other day, like, oh, the media is making us all look worse. You're part of the problem. You know what he said? He said, the media and the local officials and the state officials and the agitators and instigators and blah, blah, blah. You ever notice that everybody seems to be his problem? It's not one group. It's every fucking group wherever he goes. They're always the problem. They're always the problem. It's never like one individual. It's everybody. And that means he's the problem. And the people who come in and replace him, they all think the same way. Listen to their press conferences. You know, Christie, shoot my dog Noam, domestic terrorist. Stephen Miller, domestic terrorists. Homan, domestic terrorist. Trump, domestic terrorist. Caroline Levitt, domestic terrorist. You're all fucking domestic terrorists. Even 100,000 people in the streets of Minneapolis, apparently you're all domestic terrorists. Remember that, because the people they're sending in there dressed like Delta Force, they're not as well trained as Delta Force. So they're going to make a lot more mistakes, and a lot more people are going to get killed. A lot more people are going to get killed and injured. So don't make it easy on them. Don't fucking do stupid shit that gets you shot. But keep recording, keep the pressure on, keep coming out in numbers. All right. Let's see. We're going to go back over some questions. You guys have spent a lot of time.
This was the first one. Right?
Have you written a book yet? No. And I'll tell you why. I have a lot of friends who've written books. And it seems to me, whenever I go to write a book, it's going to make me feel like I'm writing the same book that all my friends wrote. And I know that that's not necessarily true, but someday I will. I got a writer's cabin. I'll write a book. I write articles and all that kind of stuff throughout my career. I write scripts for television. I write, scripts for documentaries. So I'm a writer, but I haven't written a book yet because it's kind of like one of those things. Like, I don't want to be doing this. I did a story on this guy. You probably saw him on Netflix, Alex Honnold, who climbed this building the other day. And I did the first I did the first story for television that had ever been done about him. And, on 60 Minutes. And, he wrote in a biography to me years later. Thank you for making me thank you for making me famous and for allowing me to become a professional climber full time. That was 7 years before Free Solo, the movie that won the Academy Award for a story on him. And people said to me then, why don't you just follow Alex around and do movies about him and write books about him? And I always said, because I don't want to be a one-trick pony where my whole career is based on the events of another person. And for the same reason I've written a book at this point. I don't want to write a book until I feel like I can say something different than what my friends have said about war. Because for every 10 war stories I have friends that have 10 more. It's a small circle of people who write about war. It's probably 100. And so I just haven't, this has become, in a sense, last month, my way of telling parts of my story. And the reason I like doing it a little bit is because, I think it's helpful to other people in some ways, part of which I can tell these stories and get this out of my system, but I can also enlighten you. Maybe some of you feel I can enlighten you. Some of you probably think I'm a dipshit, whatever. I get it. But, I think that part of it is that you guys are thirsty for information about how the world operates and the globe that we live in. And I'm pretty knowledgeable about that. And you've been to 78 countries or some shit like that. And so I have an understanding of how the world works a little bit, not because I'm smart or I went to MIT or Harvard and shit like that, but because I've been to these places. And anytime you go to a place, you learn. It's like you read a book or you go or you do both. And I've done a lot of reading in my life. And, and that's what I think I can bring to the table for you guys. All right, let's read another question. Please say again the things to add on a card ahead of time. Hospitals with phone numbers, an emergency contact for yourself. And that emergency contact should be a loved one who can give people permission to treat you. You should have a living, all the living stuff, donation cards. If you're wearing a piece of equipment, it might be nice to piece of tape on there with your blood type, right? Find out where your blood type is. If you ever see pictures of me, and I'm wearing a flak vest, you'll see A positive there. That's not my grades in college. They were usually like D minus. A blood type here and your name, right? So somebody hits you or you get hit in the face or something happens, they can't recognize you in the moment, right? While you're going through surgery, it'd be nice to know what your blood type is, who you are, and who they can contact. Your emergency card has your emergency contact number for your next of kin notification. I was in a landmine explosion that blew my vehicle up in 2000, I want to say 2003 or 2004. And my wife at the time heard about it on Fox News before anybody had a chance to contact her. You don't want that happening. You don't want somebody like Geraldo Rivera who was with us at the time working for Fox, to be going live on a satellite saying, and a journalist from 60 Minutes was, injured in this, and then not be able to tell them that I'm still alive, right? So next of kin. Have a battle buddy. I know it sounds very militant, but if you're walking with somebody as opposed to by yourself, it's helpful, because if something happens to you, got somebody to help you. You know, um, what other emergency contact information? Nearest hospital, the nearest hospital, um, the nearest local police precinct where you can go for help. Those kinds of things are helpful. Um, yeah, obviously now you can call 911. If some foreign country I'm in, you can't do that because they don't have it necessarily. So you want to know where the nearest hospital is. You maybe a phrase or two. Yeah, sorry, you're not having to deal with. Sorry, my brain is going to a foreign country. I was going to say a phrase or two that you can say, where's the nearest hospital? But you're in Minneapolis. You should be able to understand their accents, even if you're from lower Alabama. All right. How are you doing today when you saw what happened to you at Minneapolis? I'm doing fine. Yeah, I mean, my triggers are scary movies. I can't watch scary movies at all because there's people getting stabbed in scary movies and shot in scary movies and things like that. I can't watch them. And war movies, and I make war movies. I have a hard time watching war movies. If you watch the movie about my friend Brent Renault and his brother directed it, you'll see Craig going to Ukraine to pick his brother's body up, and he's filming the whole time. And some of you guys might wonder how the fuck he can do that. And it's easy. When you're a war journalist, you have this compartment in your brain that allows you to look through the camera lens and not see what's in front of you, because you're not looking at your brother. You're looking at your brother. And it is something between you and your brother when he's filming him that allows him to process that in a different way. He tells his brain he's working. And when he is making the film and editing and writing, or writing scripts and things like that, he's telling himself, I'm working. So his trauma comes later or at different times, right? So when I watch Minneapolis and I see things happening, I dissect the scene. Like, what am I seeing here in this scene? Oh, I see the guy leaving with his gun. So now I know he's unarmed. Oh, I hear a round and everybody steps back. Nobody knew where that first round came from or why. Oh, they're stepping back and he's lying still and they're still shooting him. So I dissect it like that. I don't see it like traumatically. And I think, when my big trauma comes from Bosnia, when I didn't know what I was seeing or hearing, And so that's why the first times you do this stuff, you need to be really careful and talk it through with people. The military does something called an after action review, which means every time we go on a mission and we come back from that mission, we talk about what the rights and wrongs, things we did right and wrong. If you're going with a group, maybe it's a church group or a local organized group or something, there's 40 or 50 of you or 20 of you, go back to where you guys met in the parking lot or whatever, and have 10 minutes and talk about, hey, I saw this happen with us today. Let's not do that tomorrow, right? Or this was really great. We were blowing the whistle, but it was setting these guys off because we were doing it 1 foot in front of their face. Our goal with the whistle is for people to hear and come and put pressure. I can stand 30 feet away and blow the whistle and still have people come and know that they're in town and they're in that area. But you're antagonizing when you're 1 foot away, and that's going to cause them to snap because they don't have discipline. I'll give you a hockey analogy. The great hockey players, when they get fucking run over in the middle of the game, they don't jump up and start fighting. They look at the scoreboard. Are they up by 2 goals? Or up by 5 goals? Is it a tie game? They don't lose their discipline. So when you're in the battlefield, the battle space, or you're walking down the streets of Minneapolis or Philly or somewhere in Massachusetts like Boston, it's coming. It's coming. Tom Homan's not going to stop the train. When that happens, do an after action review and ask yourself, was I doing the right thing? Was I in the right place at the right time? And that'll help you for the next day, right? And you've also had a little conversation with people in that parking lot when you're leaving that helps you process the trauma that you've all seen. Have a good cry if it makes you feel better. Have a good cry. Fill up on liquids. Go home, turn the TV off, or maybe watch something on Netflix and chill out a little bit. Go back the next day. Don't go back and play video games where they're killing each other. How do you deal with people who are protecting their peace and either don't watch the news at all or shut you down when you try to talk about they think it's not good for you? I'm not sure they're protecting their peace. Well, people who don't watch the news, I talk to them just directly because generally, if they don't watch the news, they don't have the facts. And so, for instance, I'll give you a fact that most of them don't know. They'll say, like, uh, well, they're getting rid of all these immigrants, and that's what we asked them to do when we elected them. Well, just go in the Google. I always say the Google. Go in the Google and see how many Obama deported. See how many Biden deported. The numbers are massive. They deported tons of people, but they didn't go about it in the way they're going about it now. They didn't drag them fucking out of cars and beat the shit out of them, then deport them. They didn't show up at courtrooms and create a second judiciary as when they came out of their hearings, waiting for their next hearing, arrest them right outside the courtroom. That's fucking illegal. And Obama and Biden didn't do that. And they still managed to deport people that didn't deserve to be here. So there's a way of going about it in the United States that we're supposed to do it that's judicious and fair. And that's the argument we're making to people. So if they're not listening, pull the numbers up and make them listen. Here's the numbers of deportations under Biden and under Obama. They're in the millions. They're in the millions, but they never had to act thuggish when they did it. That's why we're Americans. We don't act like fucking thugs. This isn't Russia. This isn't the Taliban dragging people off and hanging them in the soccer stadium that the United Nations built for them. That's not who we are. So tell them that. Find a fact. Sometimes 2 or 3 facts are enough to make your argument. But you're not arguing with the ICE people. They don't want to listen. These are Proud Boys. These are the guys that couldn't make it through the police academy. These are the guys that loved killing people in Afghanistan, not just because it was part of their job for their country, but the ones who probably would have been thrown out anyways. And they came out of the infantry and they couldn't get a fucking job. They didn't go get retraining. They didn't use that college fund money like a lot of my friends have done and gone back and learned to get an education, to do something different. They're thugs. And I don't care what Stephen Miller or any of those people at Chrissy Nome says about it. They're going to come pick me up someday because I'm talking shit about them. It's the truth, man. I'm sorry. And I'm not beholden to some network anymore where I got to be careful how I say it. All right, let's see. Holly's here pointing at stuff for me. Would you mind sharing how you're currently living your dream, the cabins, and how that brings you peace? Thank you very much for bringing that up. It's in my notes. When I stopped doing this kind of work after 30 years, it's the kind of job that people have for like 5 or 3, right? And I did it forever. I became so good at it that I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to just be I didn't want to cover city council meetings and cover crime. I didn't want to cover the Senate. It seemed boring to me. And the reason it seemed boring to me is after you cover war for the first time, I was a literary person. I love to read Hemingway and all this stuff. You get really immersed in what they call, in literary terms, the human condition. Man versus man versus self, man versus nature. And there is no other place in the world to see that in such, so much as a war zone. You're always seeing the human condition in spades all the time. People suffering, people having conversations with themselves about fear and bravery. And it's a very addictive place to work. And when you get really good at it, you're better than everybody around you. People want to hire you to do it, and they want to pay you a lot of money to do it. So it becomes addictive. And at a certain point, you're just like, I'm done. It's been too much. I can no longer, with 3 destroyed discs in my back, carry my flak vest and a 50-pound pack across the Hindu Kush anymore. Because while I'm now 58, the soldiers that I started covering when I was 24 and they were 24, well, they go on to retire and they replace them with more 18-year-olds. So you get older and they keep staying young. And it's fucking hard. And it plays this mental toll on you, my wife and I decided we're going to move to the country and do this thing because we wanted to be out in nature. We love riding motorcycles. We have 6 motorcycles, and we love to off-road tour where you sleep, in your campsite, and pitch a tent or, pitch a hammock between 2 trees. There's nothing like green space to cure your mind. Nothing. And that's part of the reason we started this place. We have 10 cabins. We'll have 5 more next year probably. And we're going to put in an ice rink because I'm Canadian. We have to do that, have an outdoor ice rink. We have a sauna. We have hiking paths we're cutting and mountain biking trails. And we're surrounded on 3 sides by 2 national forests. That's our neighbors. And that is, even when I'm inside this house, this is our library in the house because the writer's cabin just got, we had somebody staying there for the last 2 or 3 days, and we have to clean it and change the sheets and everything. And I'll be back reporting from the writer's cabin tomorrow night. But today we're in our library. And It's just, you know, being out in nature and seeing bears run across your property and deer scamper across your property and watching your dog chase a squirrel and chipmunks on the back porch. Man, it just takes you away. So that's something that I think, and I'm really happy you asked that question. It's something that I think that everybody should think about when you're going through 2 or 3 weeks of this traumatic stuff. You guys up in Minnesota or Michigan, those places, get out into the woods. You have the most beautiful places in the country. You know, take a trip to Montana or Wyoming. You know, go to a spa. You know, we live near Hot Springs and Warm Springs, Virginia. Go there and do a hot spring for a day. You know, and even if it's something you just go walk in the park, just go walk in a green space and take your shoes off and walk in the grass. It'll reset those parts of your brain that feel trauma. Okay, bus drive. Let's see. How do you deal with people? Oh, where? What was the other one? Oh, that we had that one.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Which one are you pointing at?
Right here.
Yeah, I did that one already.
That was after the last one, so I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. I worked at ICU for 34 years and have to compartmentalize. Yeah. Crazier it gets, the more calm you need to be. Focus, rely on your team. That's right. Yeah. Very good comment on the ICU stuff. It's very similar to conflict zone. Hectic things going on all around you. My relation to that is I've been shot at a lot and I've been in frontline battles a lot where I thought I wasn't going to live. And people were like, you know, and you panic. And the only thing that I did to tell myself to deal with the panic is focus on what's in front of you. Take your camera, film, keep filming. And if you're scared, that fear kind of goes away in that moment, but be aware of what's around you too. So, you know, what's around you is people doing things that could get you killed. So you're filming and you're looking, you're filming and you're looking, and you're taking all that in, but you're still filming. And for me, that protected me from the stuff that was going on, people shooting at you or dropping mortars around you. And there's actually videos out there of me in battlefields, like when shit's going down and I'm trying to be as calm as possible. And you'll hear it in my voice. I'm calmer than the people around me, but I'm still scared. Fear is normal. If you're not scared, again, you're a sociopath, you know? Yeah, let's see. Most of the people have taken in Maine are not illegal. Yeah, I mean, that's happening. They're going to keep doing that because their new policy, apparently, according to some people I saw an interview with, is that they're just going to take you anyways. And they're going to figure out if there's a way they can throw you out of the country, even if you have the right paperwork, you know? Yes, the cult mind is hard to crack. I'm not here to tell you how to crack the cult mind. Fuck, you know, I'm here to tell you how to protect your personal safety and to help your brain deal with the trauma. Let's see. How do I shut off my brain? I think a lot of it in terms of going out in nature, you know, and taking a walk. I like frequent walks, especially in the spring and summer. I'll just go for a walk and we have the dogs and they run up and Holly and I'll go walking together. She has a stressful job too. So taking walks are great. And I didn't really think I could get much exercise out of walking, but the older I got, the more I realized it's very, very good for your brain. Debrief. Okay. Create a card list. Let's see. I'm going up some of these other ones. Self safety and severe weather. Yep. Let's see. I mean, Bika, I think it's Bika or Becca. What about close friends who are not overly concerned about what's happening or complacent? Everybody's on their own journey, you know? Some people just don't care. And some people don't understand the urgency of it. Just find your tribe, you know? That's why I started the Misfits Club. People are like, oh, don't call me a misfit. I'm like, then don't join the tribe, you know? I want like-minded people who can kind of focus on what's in front of them and focus what's important, and they want to learn about the world, but I also want to be a little bit, you know, irreverent about it because that's who we are, right? We're people who are like, you're not going to fuck with us. People say, oh, aren't you scared about your safety? From who? Man, I've been in cars with the fucking Taliban. I've been stuffed in a trunk, taken to a safe house to talk to insurgents. I'm not fucking scared of Greg Bovino. You know, there's strength in numbers. We're creating a club, the Misfits Club. In Minnesota, it's something else. But ultimately, we're all like-minded people. And we're all going to fight for the same thing. Democracy's worth it. Look at Carney up in Canada. He's fighting for it. You know, there's strength in us, in our numbers. So be a misfit. Let's see. My triggers, I think I've talked a little bit about that. You can't shut your mind off and you cry a lot. That's okay. You know, I tell you what, Donna, Sometimes I'll watch a fucking commercial and start crying. And I have no reason. I don't know why. I'm like, it's really fucking that dogs. I'm sad you didn't get the dog food that I thought you were supposed to get. Like crazy shit. And that's just your brain. Maybe you haven't had a good cry. That's trauma response. It's okay. That's your body saying, I need to cry. Just cry. I'm a dude. I cry. Whatever. Meet me on the hockey rink if you think I'm a sissy, right? Whatever. Let it out. We're human. You got to deal with that. Admission, I have a red hot dot laser pointer and I like to get it on the forehead of these assholes. Don't do that. It's funny, but don't do it, because they're going to think they have a round on them and they're going to shoot in that direction. They might hit somebody else.
On their TV.
Oh, on your TV. Sorry, I thought you were at a rally. Yeah, don't do that. You're going to get your friends killed. Yeah, Trump. We're going to do some stuff on narcissists like Donald Trump, but I'm going to bring some professionals on to talk about it, because I have one in my family and I think I know quite a bit about it, but I didn't study it for 4 years. So I don't think I'm the right person to talk about it, but I will get somebody on to talk about it, because I think I'm dead on when I say he's a narcissist. And I think we're all starting to recognize that. This thing where he got rid of Bovino and moved him somewhere else, that's just political pressure. He wants to stay in the fight and he doesn't want to get thrown out of office. He doesn't want to be in jail. So he's made a calculated decision. Doesn't make him less of a narcissist. He's going to come back even stronger. He hasn't replaced these idiots who work underneath him. There's a reason he hires idiots. I mean, they're all about the Second Amendment until somebody has a gun on them who's lawfully holding it. I mean, where is the NRA when we need them, right? Talking about everybody has a right to have a gun in the state where they're licensed to do that. I'll tell you another thing. My wife and I both have concealed carry permits. Okay? I went to a concealed carry class. I don't carry a gun on me, but I have one in my house because we live out in the middle of nowhere. And if somebody were to come to this house, I want to be able to protect myself, and my wife wants to be able to protect herself. And so we have concealed carry permit. We can carry one. And if I'm on my motorcycle taking a cross-country trip, I can carry one if I need to, because people like to steal your dump you off the bike and steal your bike and whatever. So I'm authorized to carry one. And I'll tell you the most interesting thing about that. I don't hunt anymore. I hunted when I was a kid, and I killed a deer after hunting for 2 or 3 years for small game. And from the moment I killed that deer, I put my hunting rifle away, and I've never hunted since, because I felt like I'd done something horrible. Now, I appreciate hunters. I know they're in it for the right reasons. I just couldn't do it anymore. And it's the same reason I couldn't join the military. I can report on war and see war and tell people about war, but I cannot shoot somebody. But if I had to, because somebody was trying to harm me or my family or my friends, I wouldn't think for a second. I'd fucking put a bullet in their head. Okay. But, the thing about that is, when I went to this concealed carry class, about 80% of the people in there were liberals. They were liberals. And the reason is because they started feeling like they were getting outnumbered. There was a Muslim lady in there, and they asked her why she was getting a gun. She had her, hijab on and everything. And she said, about 2 weeks ago, a man pulled up next to me, a Trump supporter with his bumper sticker, and started screaming at me and saying he was going to kill me. And he pointed a weapon at me, and then he drove off. And she said, I'd never wanted to have that feeling again, that I couldn't protect myself. This little thin 115-pound lady. And so there's a lot more people going to these classes. They don't really understand that there's a lot more people preparing to defend themselves in a time of crisis than they think. I just don't think it's smart to take it to rally, because you're never going to overpower 15 guards, and they're going to shoot you and use it as an excuse like they have. It's just I don't think it was a smart move. I don't blame the guy. He has a right to it and all that stuff. I'm just telling you this going forward. I don't think you guys should be doing that, because you're going to give them an excuse to kill you. And that's what they want. They want an excuse to shoot you so that you can shoot back at them, so that they can create martial law, so that they can then cancel elections. Take away their excuses so that you give people in Congress the right to subpoena them and the right to take Kristi Noem in front of the Senate and charge them with fucking crimes and impeach them. The ultimate goal is to get rid of them, but you're not going to shoot your way out of this. This isn't the Wild West. Let the idiots carry the guns for now. Okay. So that's just that might be controversial. I'm sorry if it is. And I'm sorry if it bothered you that I told you that I have a concealed carry permit, but I live 20 miles from the closest town. And there are people that come here and steal things all the time, and try to steal tractors and motorcycles and come in your house and we don't leave our doors locked because we live in a place that's not that many people. Let's see. Yes, I've been to Ireland before. I've been to Ireland. It's a wonderful place. I'm a quarter Irish. That little red stuff on my beard, it's my mom's Irish heritage, and Scottish and English. And I'm told a part French as well, a quarter French. So I've got all the mean, nasty ones in me, which makes me an arrogant bastard. I'm about as half as tough as my 5'7" father was. Yeah, I'm the Mortal Kombat. I'm reading those. When I was getting ready to deploy and we were learning hand to hand, I remember there was a poster up that said, "If you're scared, say you're scared." That's right. That's right. Because vocalizing it calms you, and you're admitting that, and you're basically telling yourself, your brain, to process it in a way that's, you can process the fear better when you're admitting to it, right? You'll be better off by doing that. Thank you for that comment. To everyone in Minnesota, if you feel like you want to talk but groups aren't your thing and you just need someone to listen, you can call the Minnesota Warm Line, 855 Warm Line, 855 Warm Line. It's free, and it's just regular people who've been through this stuff too. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate you giving out that information, and maybe people will see that tonight and go to that if they need help. You'd be surprised, and all the people who are doing these protests, there's probably tens of thousands of people now who are pretty worn out and pretty scared. Remind everyone, if they have previously been diagnosed with PTSD, your PTSD isn't diminished by anyone else. Take care of yourself. That's right. You can be getting it by watching TV news, and you can be getting it by being on a sort of a frontline situation where you're dealing with ICE exclusively. Yeah, man. Everybody's fear level and everybody's pain level is different, and don't let people judge you for that. Just, it's fucking shit's hard. You're seeing people do horrible things to people. It's hard. Don't you think martial law and the Insurrection Act will be put into play by Trump? Well, I don't know. We've seen him blink twice now in the last week. Once on Greenland, because the world put pressure on him. The House and the Senate put pressure on him, I believe, and the world put pressure on him economically. They're going to continue to do that because they're fucking fed up with him. And now you've seen the world put pressure on him because of Minnesota. So does he? And the National Guard went out the other day. I thought it was great. They're coming out and giving out hot chocolate and donuts to demonstrators, right? So there's still some good people in the United States military who don't want this to go the wrong direction. They aren't in ICE, okay? So please, when you come across soldiers that are doing their jobs, or they've been ordered to come out and do their jobs, try to respect them. If they're being respectful to you, try to respect them. They've been ordered to do something. And, it's hard for a 18, 20-year-old kid to say, Mark Kelly suggests, I don't follow an unlawful order. It's hard for them. And they should be saying that. But it's going to be a number of small individuals who do that compared to the rest. And as long as they're being respectful to you, try to be respectful back, because that may happen. The Insurrection Act may put American troops on the ground defending certain things that are unlawful. It's going to be older guys you can work, you can talk to, the Mark Kellys of the world, those age groups. Those are going to be the ones resigning over the shit, like the general of Southern Command, who did not want to do Venezuela and resigned in protest. The younger guys, a lot of them actually support Trump because they're not as learned. When you're 18, 19, 20 years old, right out of high school, you don't know what's going on in the world yet. So just try to be respectful to them and don't get them all fired up. Take your argument to the right people, to lawyers, to judges. Protest, blow your whistles at a distance. Be smart. Let's see. What do I think will happen when Trump dies? I don't know, man. In the news business, it's really hard to try to predict things, just like elections. Don't try to think about that stuff. I don't try to think about it. I also don't like comments on my page about what we should do to Trump, like personally, like physically. I think that's really dangerous for all of us. You can have your own thoughts in your private mind, but don't insinuate we should be doing something to him except impeaching him, or getting rid of him, putting him in prison. Sure. Yeah, he deserves to be in prison. Impeachment? Absolutely. Anything else? Be careful what you say on my page. Do you think this mayhem is dangerous for personal safety? Is that what you're
posting?
Oh, posting is when I'm posting. Yeah, sure. Whatever. I mean, we're all in this together, and if something happens to me, somebody else will step in my place. There's lots of people. They have to make them take all of us. You know, don't make me the only person or 100 other people the only people you follow. Use your voice too. And if something happens to me or somebody happens to somebody else, fight for them. Go in there and protest. Make sure people know where we are. You know, here's the thing I came to a conclusion with. I don't want this to sound fatalistic, but it's true. When I hit about 40, I'd been all over the world covering the most dangerous conflicts from the time I was 24. I'm 58 now. I reached a certain point when I hit about 40 that I said to myself, how long does a person have to live? We don't know. I felt like I'd been to dozens and dozens of countries. And instead of watching CNN every day, I got to watch the world turn in front of my eyes wherever I was. It was an extraordinary privilege, paid for by other people. And I could spend money chasing the biggest stories in the world across any border in the world. What a privilege to have. And I realized at 40, I'd had a complete life. And I still believe that. I've had a complete life. And most people on this page will never have been to or seen the things, for good or ill, that I've been able to see, that other people have paid me to go see and tell them about. And that's an honor. And I've lived a long life. Now, I don't want to die tomorrow. I'm not fatalistic. But if it does, I've seen more than everybody else. So I'm lucky. So don't fucking mourn people who live their life to the fullest. I remember one time I was in Ramadi. You probably heard about Ramadi. And we landed at some little airport outside Ramadi, and we took a convoy of U.S. military vehicles on an embed into this place. It was like an elementary school. I mean, you know how big elementary schools are. Not big, little compound walls around it, like 10-foot tall walls, and a little playground area and a parking lot, and the elementary school. And I was with these U.S. Marines, the bravest motherfuckers you will ever see in your life. And they were out of Camp Lejeune. And this young captain who was probably 28 years old was there. And, they put us on the top floor of this 3 or 4 story building. And the insurgents surrounded the building day and night. And you could drive down the road from the airport to this little elementary school, it's maybe 2 or 3 miles. And they would fucking set off roadside bombs all along that route. Everything outside of that elementary school for something like a mile was what they called a free fire zone. So what that means is, from the rooftop, if you saw some person inside the free fire zone, you were authorized to automatically shoot them, no matter if they were civilians or not, because the insurgents dressed like civilians. And if you were inside that free fire zone, nobody lived there anymore. You were probably planting roadside bombs. So if you had a little satchel and you're walking along like you're just a normal person, if that person got shot and you went out later, you'd find a roadside bomb in it. And so that's a fucking scary place to be. And the insurgents would stand inside that free fire zone, and they try to get a few hundred meters from you, and they try to pick you off on the roof of that building. And so that building was nothing but bunkers all the way around it. And they would mortar the rooftop. And remember, I was on the floor right below the rooftop. And we get mortared day and night for hours on end. And the Marines would switch out every 4 days because of combat fatigue. Every 4 days, Marines moving back to another place and another unit coming in. And I was there 13 days, and I was ready to go after 9. I was like, this is too much. I got to get the fuck out of here. Let's go. And my correspondent's like, just a couple more days. Right? And we stayed to the 13th day, and we had this incredible series of stories that we ran on the CBS Evening News. I didn't even work for the CBS Evening News. I worked for 60 Minutes, and my boss had just had a Ramadi piece the year before. And he's like, well, it sounds pretty good, but give it to Evening News because, we've already had a Ramadi piece in the last year. So we did. We put this package of pieces together and gave it to the Evening News, which we didn't work for, and we won our first Emmy Award. And we watched people get shot frequently, and it was crazy, the craziest thing. And I was shot, and we were scared that I was going to get pulled out. It was a superficial wound. They wrapped me up. I got shot in the arm. They wrapped me up, and then the next day we were out doing more missions. And I forget the point of this. Anyways, it was just it was a crazy environment. When you're in those kind of environments, you just don't even experience it till a long time after that. So I still have the image of Kent State student putting a flower in the barrel of a rifle. Yeah, they do that in Ukraine too. 4 years ago, old ladies walking up and putting a sunflower in the barrel of a Russian soldier who was walking through their town. And she said to him in Russian, he said, "What are you doing?" "I'm putting this flower in your gun or in your pocket, because when they shoot you and kill you, um, the the sunflowers from this will put a sunflower where you lied and died." That's
Swig.
that's war zone humor for you. Let's see. What was it that you learned? Was it there? Sorry. What is there to be learned from Iran and other countries? Well, if you're talking about their totalitarian states, you know, I would say that you're leaning towards that here in the United States. We're talking about a man who wants to hold power, doesn't want to hold elections, is trying to get his hands on election rolls for a reason. He wants to try to get as close as he can to having what they consider a fair election. But generally they're not really trying to have fair elections. They aren't in Iran. And when they get control of a place like that, a small group of people, the Ayatollahs in this case, can rule a large group of people. We know that MAGA is about 33% of the voting populace, and then there's some more people who are Republicans who vote along with them because they don't like women or black people, right? Whatever. Some of my friends will take issue with that, but I think it's true. And that very small group of people can figure out ways to weasel their way in. And when they're in, they don't want to leave. And they'll try everything they can not to leave. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. It's not about fake elections or, immigrants voting that aren't allowed to vote. It's all horseshit. We all know that. It's about them controlling and holding on to power. Because if they know that they don't gerrymander districts in Texas and Indiana and places like that, they'll lose elections. North Carolina is a great example of that. They'll lose elections if they don't gerrymander. So, there's lessons to be learned from those places. Iran is a great example of that. And by the way, Iran will seize control and they'll hold on to it by force with the Revolutionary Guard. You're seeing the American version of the Revolutionary Guard in creation right now with ICE. No, I never talked to Bill Plant about his experiences in Vietnam, but I've talked to lots of people. We had 60 Minutes people who covered Vietnam and you know, uh, different kind of conflict. Journalists ran all over the place there. They weren't necessarily as much of the enemy as they are now, but they also didn't embed as much either. Yeah. Uh, a therapist who practices? Oh, sorry. Can you do an event discussing the media consolidation and demise of Voice of America? Yeah, sure. At a later date, I can definitely do that. I'll try to look at that. Silicon Valley CEOs need to pressure Trump. That's the only. Oh, sorry. That's the only reason he didn't send ICE to San Francisco. Yeah. I mean, I think all those folks, all the Zuckerbergs in the world, and are in his pocket. And you've got the head of Apple. On the day that somebody shot and killed, he's at if you believe the news about it, he's at an event for Melania Trump's film opening that was paid for by Jeff Bezos' Amazon, $40 million. I worked my whole life to try to get funding for films, and I spent half my time doing that. And Melania Trump walks in with her idea for a film, and Jeff Bezos greenlights it. It's amazing. Let's see, what time are we at now?
Well, it's 9:29.
And we're going to have another, maybe 2 or 3 more questions. It's because Trump and his band of sycophants will have to go back to the 30s and be pariahs to the rest of the world. That's true. That's true. A short answer there. We need our misfit family. I agree. Thank you. I'll just make another plea with you guys. Couple things. One, please post photos of these people who have been killed by ICE. I think the list is like 8 or 10 or 12 now. And it's not just the 2 people who were killed in Minneapolis. Some of them were, Latina, some of them are Latino, and some of them were African American. And let's not forget those folks just because they're not white people. And the other thing I would say is, do your best to be a part of an organized group, so you can organize. The third thing I'll say is, thank you for all my subscribers on here. We'll probably release this to the to non-paid subscribers so they can learn from it. I mean, a lot of people are angry because they're like, you have something to learn, you're trying to cash in on it. It's like, man, I do 12 hours. My wife, Holly, can tell you. Just tell them how much time I do a day of this shit. Go on.
14 to 16 hours minimum.
You got to be in the middle so they can see you.
No, we can both be on.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a lot. So we really appreciate the support, and we'll just set aside the folks who have something to say about
Yeah.
the cost, you know,
I mean, even with Holly doing like 4 or 5 hours a day of my administrative stuff just to keep up with all the platforms we're on, and we're still trying to figure out. And man, I still haven't figured out how to do a stitch on TikTok. You know what I mean? I'm an old school dude. We're still trying to figure this out. And I have people say like, oh, they're mad at me because I can't let everybody on for free. Man, I'm supposed to be running a cabin business and putting people in 10 cabins a day, and I don't have time to do it right now. I'm just hoping that they rent, you know. And we had 10 people, 22 people here this weekend renting cabins, and I'm on these platforms still trying to make videos. I'm chopping wood and still trying to make videos. So, you know, if you can spread the word to try to get as many people to subscribe, that's really helpful. I don't want to sound too much like a used car salesman, but 90% of the content we do is free. You know, I don't know what else everybody wants me to do. You know, I moved to the mountains to escape the news business and the film business. And it all started with one video that I was pissed off about Barry Weiss taking control of 60 Minutes and CBS News, because those are my friends. And I'm fucking fed up with her. She's a bitch. She doesn't know what she's doing. So I started doing this stuff again, and it became something where people wanted to hear what I had to say about other stuff, which I can do fairly easily. But you know, and I watch this stuff enough, but I don't spend 10 hours a day watching the news. I don't really have to do that. I can go through my news channels and New York Times and listen to a little NPR, and I have enough information in my head from a few of those just to analyze what's going on and tell you what's going to happen next. I frankly am just stunned that you guys are concerned enough to pay attention to me. But again, I've told people it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the fact that Americans really want to know somebody who can tell you the unbridled thoughts about things. And I can bring some facts to the table. You'll get that from your other news sources, but I can help you connect the dots. And hopefully that's something that's worth $8 a month, you know? And I know, you know, that it's a lot of money to some people nowadays. They can't even afford a newspaper subscription. But it's a lot of time I put in too. I hope you guys understand that.
Somebody said we should get a teenager to do the TikTok.
Yeah, I know.
Tell them how many teenagers are in our county.
Like when we first moved here, the county we live in had nine teenagers in the graduating class. It's crazy.
And they're busy raising goats for 4-H.
And they're busy raising goats for 4-H and stuff. And so it's a lot. Yeah, I work with somebody remotely. I have a lot of friends who want to help and stuff like that. But right now, we don't like generate enough. I don't generate any revenue at all on my Facebook page, where I have 120, close to 120,000 viewers. Zero revenue, because I don't talk about cats or chicken parmesan. I talk about politics, so it's against their community standards. Can you imagine? Let me ask you if you guys disagree with this. Like, the community standards say I can't like say the GUN word, right? Or I can't say I have to say pew pew, or like, how fucked up is that? People are being shot, you know, by ICE agents with the pew pew, but I can't say the word. Fuck that. It's like, we're supposed to be able to communicate with clear language. That's what I do know, clear language. Communicate with clear language about the things that make us angry, right? And I can't say the word pew pew because it'll get me banned. But we can show videos of people being shot by them, right? And the president of the United States can go on and call us all domestic terrorists, but I can't say pew pew. We need to start pushing back against these social media companies that are restricting how we can communicate. That's bullshit. And I can't say the SA word, right? I have to say grapes. It's a terrible word because it's a terrible event when it happens. Fucking assholes, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Instead of telling me what I can and can't say, they should be fact checking. They got rid of all their fact checkers for a reason. They don't want their MAGA people being fact checked. Assholes. Yeah, I'm surprised I can say shot too. I get messages now thinking I'm going to be restricted for what I'm saying. I guess when I say shot, I really mean basketball shot. A couple more questions. I'll probably.
So can just an administrative point. So someone was asking how to contact Jeff directly. You can email from the writer's cabin at gmail.com and directly email. And then someone else was asking about the cabins. We do have a website. It's virginiabackcountry.com. So you can take a look at what we're doing there.
And we're gonna be doing seminars and stuff in the spring and summer for all sorts of myriad of things, like, you know, trauma stuff. We already have a journalist group coming in. Craig Renault, who's my friend who directed the film that we worked on, is going to come, and we're going to have people come in and talk about trauma. We're going to have bushcraft stuff up in the mountains. We're going to have, you know, writers retreats, filmmaking retreats. we're going to have yoga retreats, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to do it sort of during the week so that we can keep our weekends open for renters to come through who are tourists. But we think that's a good way to spend our time, and it keeps me engaged, the kind of stuff I'd love to do. So be looking for that stuff. Holly's pulling up another question here. What?
Mary Jo, new shirt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mary Jo says we need a new shirt in our merchandise shop, which is on from the Writer's Cabin on our Substack page. You can go down the page and see our little merchandise thing. Mary Jo says we need a shirt that says pew pew on it.
Mike McIntyre wants me to say that again. I'm guessing he wants the information. So from the Writer's Cabin at gmail.com is our email address. Our website for our cabin business is www.virginiabackcountry.com.
And the other thing I'll say is this is really important for you to understand. I get thousands of comments and messages a day now. Thousands. I say I spend 5-6 hours a day reading all your comments. The first thing I do, I read them all day long while I'm trying to work and write scripts and things like that. And while we're trying to clean our cabins for the next group coming in. And today I spent like an hour just cleaning the driveway with my ATV. And it's, so I'm going back and forth doing all these things. And these thousands of comments, I literally try to read every one. I'm not going to always be able to do that with 120,000 followers on just one of my platforms, and 30,000 on another and several thousand on this. But I do read them. And if I don't respond to you or I just hit the like button, please understand, man, it's just insane. I could spend 20 hours a day just responding to my comments. And some of you send me videos and stuff like that. I appreciate that. But if it's a big event, I promise you it's my business. I've seen the video. I sometimes will have the same video sent to me 100 times. 100 times. So maybe if you have something personal to say to me, talk to me about something, or something that's really inside baseball or inside information, that's really better than just sending me the news of the day. There's a guy in Norway who's really great who talks to me about the markets, the US European markets, and will talk to me about bond sales and things like that. That's way more interesting to me because I can then use that and start studying it and figuring out what kinds of things, and how it's going to affect the European-American trade relationship, right? That's different than just sending me this guy who was shot or somebody who was hit with pepper spray. I've probably seen that at that certain point. I mean, I literally talked to a reporter today who's on the ground when Bovino was taken out. So I still have those sources and friends who are reporting on it from the place. In fact, the cameraman that was working on this story in Minnesota worked with me on the Creech Air Force Base drone story that we did, where we had a man on the ground in Afghanistan and we videotaped him from 30,000 feet up, driven by guys at a secret base in Nevada. And he was my cameraman for that years and years ago. So I still have these people in my life. I just don't call them all the time because I don't want to put them in a bad position when I'm talking shit about CBS. Okay, we'll take one more question here.
Someone, it's been asked twice if you can share some of the places you get your news.
Okay, some of the places I get my news. I have a routine. I have a New York Times subscription, and I read the New York Times for the top stories of the day, just because I think they do good analysis and they're well reported, and I can trust their accuracy. No matter what MAGA says, they're the best. Them and the BBC are the best news organizations in the world. They are everywhere on the planet when a big event is happening, and they usually beat me there. And I always thought I was there pretty quickly. And so they stay there, so they understand the story. And satellite feeds for the evening news or whatever, ABC nightly news. They have bureaus in these places. New York Times has bureaus in Kabul. BBC has bureaus in Kabul. Okay, so that's look the size of their newsrooms and study where they have people, and you'll know that they're serious about journalism. Fox News, like I've never been anywhere Fox News was on an average day. They fly in and fly out, and I was on a U.S. Special Operations Base for 3 months one time, and who did Fox send to go out on missions? And he couldn't even come in because he didn't go through the proper channels. But he just figured he's going to show up and just start working because he's Fox, and they would just let him in. Oliver North. I mean, literally, the head of the Iran-Contra affair is now on Fox News, running around the globe trying to pretend like he's a journalist. So consider your source. So I do New York Times. I also have a Washington Post subscription. Although now I'm looking more to ProPublica because I have some friends that work there who are excellent print journalists, including my friend John Sullivan, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner who runs one of their investigative teams. I watch Frontline when I can. Frontline, I have a lot of friends that work there as well. He used to work at 60, and they tell great verite stories and do great interviews, and they don't pull punches. I will watch Jon Stewart whenever I can because there's a semblance of news of what he does, and I think we all need to laugh, man. So you can get a little bit of news by watching his show, and you get a chance to laugh at the news. Don't be afraid to do that. Be human. Zateo is starting to look interesting to me. Mehdi Hassan is, especially on the interest when you're into, say, Gaza, he knows the facts about Gaza better than anybody else. So he can call, the Israeli government out on shit that they're doing. It's bullshit, and those kinds of people. Now, I know there are a lot of independent journalists now that are out there. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to say bad things about them, but a lot of them are just parroting the news that they see each day. And they're not very good at analysis because maybe they're a little bit young and they haven't been anywhere yet. And they're getting a following because they're just regular and they do stuff all the time. And there's particularly one or two that I know of. I definitely am not going to name them. They're probably really good and they're working hard and they're young, but they're parroting what they see on TV and putting their face to it. And that's not news, and it's really not analysis. They might come out 2 hours later that breaking news: Bovino is getting ready to be fired by the the Trump administration. What's really been reported by the other stations or networks prior to him reporting it. He's not doing a lot of original reporting, for instance. So find people that do original reporting and probably have a little seniority and they've been around the world a little bit and can really analyze these situations. I also love Heather Cox Richardson. What can I say? Some of you compared me to her. That's ridiculous. She's really, really smart. I'm kind of a little bit dumb. And she has a PhD in history. And so history is really important when analyzing current events. I would urge anybody to subscribe to her. If you're going to subscribe to me, please subscribe to her. She's wonderful. And I read her every morning, her letter every morning. It's the first thing I read in my email. I would also watch or read Joyce Vance, because if you're looking for legal analysis, and it's so important right now to watch what the courts are doing, there is no better person than a former prosecutor for the federal government to tell you what you're seeing. And she's honest about it. And she's beholden to fucking no one. So watch Joyce Vance. And those are probably my big ones. BBC, I love the BBC, and I love listening to NPR as well. And if you hit 4 or 5 of those in a given day, you will be up with the news, and your analysis will become better and better as time goes on. I think I'll still be able to offer you some perspective on things, but our whole goal is to make everybody here a little bit smarter, so that when they get into discussions with their second uncle about how Trump's a great guy, they can tell him to fuck off. So, anyways. Let's see. I'll take one more question, then we're going to go for the night. Will this all be listed on your site? I don't think I can list. We've done a story already on my site about the news sources that I like. So you can go back and try to find it if you have time. And you're impressed that I'm doing this at all. Thank you very much. It's fun and exhausting, but you people are giving me energy. I really believe that. And every time somebody sends me a picture of some t-shirt that they bought, I mean, we make like $5 on every t-shirt, even if they're like $30. We make like $5 on them because the company that makes them makes all the money. But every time I see somebody has a t-shirt or a mug of Georgie or something like that, my dog, it's like uplifting because it means somebody's cares about what we're doing. And I feel like, the tribe is growing a little bit more each day. A really fresh perspective learning. Yeah. 2 of you. Yeah, Heather Cox Richardson, she's definitely awesome. Jake Bro, I've not heard of him. I'm gonna have to look him up. I have a lot of friends who cover Ukraine though, so I kind of get emails and stuff from them. All right, one last one. I keep saying that, but there's a lot of questions on here. I don't want to make everybody feel left out. I won't talk about any of the merchandise. You guys have a bunch of questions about that. You can look on our site, on this site, and look for merch. Stay healthy, kids. Somebody's left the chat there. Thank you. Let's see.
What is the reach of your crowd? That's the last question.
I don't know.
See at the very bottom.
The reach of my crowd. I started out with 1,900 friends on my personal Facebook page, Jeff Newton, and I think I have today 117,000 or 118,000. And it goes up a couple thousand a day. But again, I'm not monetizing that. There's nothing I make from that except makes it harder for me to go through my email. And none of my friends can write me on that anymore because they get buried in the email traffic. And then I think on From the Writer's Cabin, which is on Facebook and Substack, the one on Facebook I think has maybe 27 or 30,000, something like that. And I just started that about 10 days ago, maybe, and then the Substack one is the one that we're trying to grow the most because it's actually where I can make money for all the time I put in. And that is just a couple thousand subscribers. So, push your friends. All right. I think that's the last one for the night. Thank you guys so much. And to the Star Wars lover, Jacqueline, I appreciate you being here. Yeah. And, thank you so much for following us and have a good evening. Okay. Night, everyone. Pew, pew. Misfits. I don't even know how to end the conversation. End.